Hello everyone, my name is Aryan and I am student at Rehan School. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to remarkable individual who is a true fracture navigator in the field of physical psychology. Meet David Lecter, a recent college graduate who possesses an impressive background in this fascinating discipline. David has not only excelled academically but also gained invaluable practical experience in various domains. So, how are you, David?
It's nice to meet you, Aldion. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Al-
Yes, yes,
Aldion.
yes.
Okay, great. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm very impressed um, with your vigor,
So,
tenacity to get me on. Appreciate it. Look forward to it.
David, first of all, I am very thankful to giving your precious time to me.
For sure, no problem. Thanks
Yes.
for having me.
So, so please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is David. I am a recent college graduate. My background is in neuroscience and psychology. I am currently working in a lab as well as working a couple of jobs in social media. My goal is to combine those two interests and eventually start my own platform talking about science, politics, and culture.
Okay, very nice. So my first question is, can you tell us about your academic background and how your study and psychology have prepared you for the professional world?
Yeah, so originally I was a pre-medical student when I started. I was always passionate about going into healthcare. I was thinking about becoming a physical therapist, doing many different professions. And then I got to college, decided to switch majors from biochemistry to neuroscience slash psychology later on in my academic career. And I really enjoyed those classes. I listened to a lot of podcasts related to it over the COVID period, and that kind of also inspired me a little bit. I've always had an interest in the brain and the mind, how those two work. I've also been interested in how um, spirituality and religion can be modeled psychologically and neuroscientifically. So those two, that kind of discipline, it's a cross between cognitive neuroscience, cognitive psychology. That's sort of a newer discipline, and that's where my interests fall academically. And then in terms of social media, I found over the period of COVID, I started listening to a lot of different podcasts, subscribed to probably over 500 throughout the last maybe 4 years, which is a ton. I don't keep up with all of them, but I'm aware of them. And I learned a lot of how podcasts become successful, how that's become a new uh, growth model on social media, how people enjoy it. And I decided to, you know, use my knowledge to help other people. Over the time period, I worked with a few different YouTubers. One of them was is called Shane Hummus. He has a YouTube channel where he describes or he helps people find their career choice through it, sort of a practical framework, but also with on par with their interest. And I started off by commenting on his channel quite a bit around maybe right before the start of COVID. For about a year, we would communicate like that. Towards the end of 2020, I subscribed to his Patreon. We ended up uh, he ended up sending me his direct contact information over like after 6 months of that because he didn't really use it. And then for almost about 2 years now, I think it'll be 2 years this week, we've been communicating directly. And I guess I've kind of been working with him to advise him on how to grow the channel. So we've seen a lot of success. We transitioned from college degree content into um, per, from basically personal finance with a lens into college degree content to then into career based content to now into a combination of entertainment and advice. So that was one of my real formative experiences in social media. Now I'm starting to work with two other companies, and I'm going to help them grow their channels from two different perspectives. One from more of the political cultural side, and one from the scientific psychedelic side.
Okay, very nice. What motivated you to pursue a career in both medicine and social media? How do these two fields complement each other in your perspective?
Yeah, so I don't think it was necessarily something I thought about when like I decided to okay, I'm gonna do social media and medicine. I'm gonna get this degree and that. It kind of happened naturally, but I realized that science communication is a big thing, and the sort of self-help industry on YouTube primarily, it's a very big industry, and there's a lot of people providing different kinds of information, and there's a lot of different niches you could approach it from. So I believe that with my background in science in that sort of space, I can eventually create unique content to help people on a larger scale by using social media. Sometimes you're limited academically with the impact you can have outside of maybe a research setting. However, if you spend your career, you can potentially create something that can help many people. But usually that's done in the context of maybe some company thereafter. So that's kind of what inspired combining the two interests. And I think right now you have the opportunity to do so, just generally speaking, using social media as kind of a tool to leverage your impact in whatever career you find yourself in.
Could you elaborate on your experience in basic science research? What were your main responsibility and notable finding during that time?
Yeah, so I actually just my podcast came out that I did a few months back with another scientist, and I kind of went over what I do in my lab. So you can definitely check that out on my LinkedIn profile, David Lachter, Lakhtr. But to summarize it, I do experiments. I work as a research technician, and I do experiments that basically show the interaction between two proteins. Now, proteins are basically any real it's like the main building block essentially, and it makes up pretty much the entirety of our cells, and then cells make up our bodies. And then with this technique called BRET, bioluminescence resonance energy transfer, you're able to track interactions between two or more different things that complement each other on the level of a cell or inside a cell, maybe between certain cells. And by doing so, you're able to understand how to create drugs or medications to target those interactions if they do exist. And then you're able to apply that to many different disciplines in medicine, physiology, and so on. So it's a very interesting technique. I use that on my day to day in the lab. Um, I've been working there for about a year. It's very interesting. Specifically, we research these receptors. Receptors is something that a cell has where when something interacts with it, whether it's a molecule that binds to it, whether it's a light molecule that sort of provokes it, it has downstream effects. So it's like you could think of it as an equation, 1 + 1, and then there's an equal sign, 2, and that 2 happens inside of the cell itself. So it's kind of like it's a reaction. These are GPCRs, they're called G protein coupled receptors, and they're pretty much the main, it's called metabotropic receptor, which is basically something that has downstream effects in a cell. And these downstream effects, they're based in biochemistry, and they can have a multitude of impact in terms of our metabolism, in terms of different systems in our body. And that's the main way drugs are created for different diseases.
Okay, how did your involvement in clinically research contribute to your overall skill set? Can you share any significant publication or achievement that from that period?
Yeah, so specifically during that period, there's a lot of troubleshooting that happens when you're in the lab. You have to learn to think on your feet. You have to learn how to use the techniques so you can manipulate them when you're doing certain projects. Otherwise, I have other clinical experience working in cardiology research, and I have a couple publications there. Interventional cardiology is basically you use these little wires and you insert them in the arteries, and potentially you could insert them in veins. And usually you want to stop a blood clot this is what people have when they have heart attacks, and you can actually use it the same way for people who have strokes, except it's a little bit different of a discipline. But you essentially insert wires through the leg or through the arm, and then you're able to break up a clot, put in stents, which are these little like coils that you can see maybe if you have a pen. I can show you an example. Let me see if it comes up. But you could pretty much see it's like a little coil inside of the pen. You would insert similar things inside of the arteries, and that helps people survive who have problems with blood pressure, blood clots, etc. So it's very interesting with the findings there. There's also this thing where some people can be born with congenital issues. So they're born with maybe holes in the heart or extra or less veins from the connecting the heart to the lungs. So diagnosing that is another feature of this discipline. And so we investigated a lot of people through who potentially had those conditions, how to sort of, when a patient comes with certain issues, how to diagnose one of those congenital defects versus someone who has maybe another issue, but they both come in with, let's say, heart pain or certain palpitations. And another main facet of that research was during COVID, a lot of people delayed coming to the hospital for obvious reasons, but that sort of exacerbated or increased their issues that were happening with their heart, maybe with their lungs. So we were able to understand what that impact was during kind of the prime time of COVID. So a lot of different projects. I would say the main takeaway is the analytical sort of mindset that you take away from it. There's a lot of statistics involved, but a lot of thinking through problems. That's a big plus to doing research, and it's always great to get that done.
Okay, with 2 years of direct inpatient care, what were the most challenging situations you incurred, and how did you handle them?
Yeah, so my clinical care, I had about a couple of years experience working in a hospital setting. This was inpatient, so in the hospital, in the surgical ICU and orthopedic surgical units right outside of the ICU. Once again, it wasn't necessarily anything too challenging. The main thing was to learn how to manage many different things. I would work with doctors, nurses, the receptionists, work on computers, work at the phone, paging doctors, transferring patients, etc. One of the formative experiences, I think, was having to go get blood for a blood transfusion when a patient was coding or a patient has lost heart rhythm. So you have to go and reset that heart rhythm. So that was very interesting to see. I felt like I had a big duty, and I was a lot younger at that time. So I think it was a very interesting experience. Another time, for example, I was in another hospital, basically similar kind of work, and I was able to see sort of in the emergency room, someone had a heart attack, and then within maybe a few minutes, there was a surgical team that came to take care of that patient. And it was a very intense environment, but I think I learned a lot. One of the lessons you come away with is you learn how to deal with pressure and think in those situations with more clarity than maybe you started with. So that helps in pretty much anything you do, being able to organize your mindset and be able to deal with different environments as situations present themselves.
Okay, how did you approach the task of growing the YouTube channel, the Shan Humo Show, from 0 to 1,000 subscribers? What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so being that I started working with Shane around a few years ago, the main thing I was able to help with was give advice on different backgrounds he could use, what his audience seemed to like from the comment section, different analytics. That was kind of where my sort of expertise was at. I watched a lot of YouTube, so I was able to offer a lot of advice. I also watched a lot of his content early on, being around the 10,000 subscriber mark. And so I was able to sort of analyze that and come up with ideas to test. And it was a pretty good collaborative effort. So that happened naturally. Once again, I started communicating through the comments, providing feedback every day, pretty much. He posted often. Through that, we ended up communicating directly, and then that basically assisted, or that relationship helped grow his content. And I think there's a lot of new social media jobs now in this sort of creator economy. And, the titles kind of, someone will call themselves a creative strategist or a creative thumbnail producer, etc. There's a lot of titles, but the way you get those jobs is through having experience and finding those opportunities. There's not really a college degree that you go for or a specific education that allows you to get these kind of jobs. But this is going to be the most prominent field in the next 5 to 10 years, especially with artificial intelligence tools. So my biggest advice is, if you have the interest and the skill sets, especially early on, there's no barrier to entry. Obviously, you might not want to be super young, but you could always develop the skills. You want to create projects. So with your skills, you want to showcase them. The best way is to create a portfolio. With the portfolio, you either show the work you've done with other people, or maybe even in programming. Let's say you learn a programming language on a computer, you create different, maybe calculator app, or you create a little video game. And that doesn't mean you necessarily did it for someone, but you created this thing, and now you can show this is a representative of your expertise. And so when you go to a potential employer, that could be part of your application to showcase what value you can provide to them. And so my main advice, and I believe you go to a school where these freelance skills are taught often, or social media, digital marketing. And so I think it's very good to get involved. There's, all this content is free online. All you need is sort of an access to that, maybe a laptop, computer, phone, and then interest. You want to become obsessed with these things and invest a lot of time into them. And as you maybe approach the age where you want to supplement your income, or you want to work on bigger projects, you should do that. And another piece of advice, don't necessarily, if you want to reach out to people, don't necessarily ask for a job right away. Present different ideas to them, show how they can relate to things you've seen on other channels. Based on your expertise, say that, okay, I think you could do this better based on this, and offer that for free. And then if you do well, potentially you can stay on. That's sort of how you navigate this space. It's like a little snake. There's no real entry in, but that's how you get yourself exposed to the community. A big way of doing that now, for example, LinkedIn, you can go on all these different social media companies that you know of, add the employees, and a lot of them will add you back. And once you start building up that community, you'll see the opportunities that arise specifically in this field that doesn't necessarily have a direct port of entry via internships. You kind of have to seek out those opportunities for yourself. But I recommend that for people starting high school, to sort of involve themselves in that and develop those skills, whether it's thumbnail creation, video editing, you added pictures, maybe it's programming languages, anything like that, because those skills can be applied pretty much anywhere nowadays. Yeah, I think you froze. Alian, can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Perfect. I can hear you. Yeah. There we
Okay.
go.
Okay, David, in your opinion, what are the key factors for building and engaging an audience on social media platform like YouTube? How do you ensure consistent growth and maintain viewers' interest?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of factors. Let's say right off the top of my head, you have to make sure, for example, if you're a new person, you're not managing someone's channel, you're just kind of starting in your own lane. You want to figure out what niche do you want to start in. You don't necessarily want it to be too broad. You want to kind of narrow down your focus, because when you narrow down your focus, you basically become the person who's the one of the only people creating content in that space. And then as you grow an audience there, you can expand into a broader audience. And then that's kind of how you see growth in social media, specifically YouTube. And you want to be knowledgeable, because for when you're knowledgeable about something, you could speak at it at length. And then right now, the main way to sustainably grow a platform is to create that long form content where you're able to speak at something at length, or make it or present it in a creative way, or say, make it interesting to watch, because then you could chop up that content, make it into short form content. And now all platforms are competing for short form content now. So it's a very lucrative time to get it, especially if it's something unique. And then you can use different skill sets to target specific audiences with that short form content as well. But authenticity is the main currency, appearing authentic to the viewer, because that's how you develop a connection with them. So that's why if you're able to speak at something at length because you're knowledgeable about it, or you find it interesting yourself and you decide to explore it, usually it's much easier to create that seem authentic in a long form piece of content, because it's just natural. And then that's what people crave towards. I don't necessarily know why, but that's kind of always been the attraction in social media. And it usually has something to do with a parasocial relationship. People like to latch onto something and invest themselves in it, and that's a function of focus and attention. And so if you're able to utilize that with whatever space you're starting in, that's the most important. So really being diligent, thinking through what kind of content you want to produce, where you start, and then being consistent. All of these algorithms are based on consistency and uniqueness, unless you're able to create high production content right off the bat. So you want to be able to create consistent content, upload usually as many times as you can initially, and then you shift more into quantity over quality as you gain a subscriber base, and you're able to start developing an income which you can invest into the content you create. So thinking about it in that strategic way as you go along each step, that's the best way to become successful over time on social media.
Okay, so David, my last question is: can you share an example of a difficult decision you had to make, either in your medical work in managing social media campaigns? How did you handle it, and what were the outcomes?
Yeah, similar to the medicine, there are always challenges. Specific ones don't come to mind. The main thing that you want to learn is how to be adaptable and how to troubleshoot things. And that only really comes with experience, and not even necessarily in social media, but the ability to be, my, strong-minded that you're going to figure this out. You have to be resourceful, figure out how to use different resources to figure out what issue you have or what goal you have, and always being a student. So learning different ways on how you can develop these skills, how you can solve these problems, and working your way around it. The main thing is being consistent and being sort of smart about how you approach things. So if you're able to develop those qualities and you have that ambition and sort of purpose behind what you do, it is much easier to approach whatever things you want to do. And developing that earlier on, usually through experience, whether it's an internship, whether you're doing it for yourself, usually if you're able to do it for yourself and develop those projects to fit your portfolio even at a younger age, that's usually the best, because that shows that you're passionate about it. You're willing to invest the time. So if you're able to sort of have that about you and apply that to anything you do, once you develop that portfolio, once you develop those projects, and then once you use that to get jobs or internships, that's the best way to do it. You want to have a keen attitude on how you approach these things. And now is the best time to do it. Alternative education is basically these skill sets that you learn at a younger age. College is, depending on where you are and what your goals are, it's necessary, but not for everything, because of how the barrier to entry for doing these kind of jobs online is so low. And as long as you have an internet connection, you can do it. And it's all about having the goals set. And it's always, people always say, set your goals, write down your goals. And you're like, oh, it doesn't, why not? But it's because you want to be able to clearly understand each step that you want to take and have a plan. And you want to be able to shift that plan whenever it's necessary. And that's usually how you find the opportunity, because the opportunities only present themselves if you're in space to get lucky. You only get lucky if you're in the position to get lucky, and you want to optimize for that. So if your goals are to do X, Y, Z, you want to figure out what's the best way to start doing that, and those will maximize your chances. And then you kind of reiterate that as you go along, and eventually you end up doing what you want to do.
Okay, once again, thank you, David, for giving your precious time to me. So, hope so, everyone, you learned something new with David. So, thank you so much for watching.
For sure. Thank you so much, Adyan. It's been a pleasure.